Hello! Today I am here with a lunchtime rant because my friend Jess sent me a TikTok that I watched before work and it got me all sudsed up and unhappy before I started my day, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna film this at lunch because I got some stuff to say. So this has been out for a little bit, but somehow I had missed it. This shows you how not online I am recently. But the BBC, in collaboration with the Agatha Christie estate, has released something called a Maestro course, where Agatha Christie, in AI form, teaches you how to write a mystery novel. Okay. From what I can tell, Maestro is kind of like the great courses or masterclass. You know, like you're paying for an expert in the field to give you a course of some kind. I think like Martin Scorsese does one for masterclass on directing or filmmaking. That's the type of offering this is. And when she sent me this TikTok, which I will credit here, I'll try to remember to link her below. I think her name is Celine, and she did a good like quick 3-minute assessment of what she thought about this and her problems. And I thought that was a well done summation. So that I watched that, and then I went and watched the trailer, and I watched the behind the scenes vignette, which was like 10 minutes. And I think this course is wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. I want, though, to start by being fair, because when my gut reaction was very negative, it was an immediate no from me, and it made me mad immediately. And so then I tried to pause and say, okay, Mara, let's think critically about this. Is this just an emotional reaction of like, this isn't the way I would do something, but maybe it's okay for somebody else to do it that way? Or do you think this is actually bad? And I immediately came up with several reasons I thought that it was bad. So this is my opinion, but I do want to be fair. So to be fair, I do think generative AI has some intrinsic ethical issues to it, but I do want to say not all AI is antithetical to creativity. Let's just limit our scope of discussion to use of AI in creative fields. Not all AI is antithetical to creativity. I think that that's too broad of a stroke. For instance, I'm sure I'm going to use some version of AI to create the thumbnail for this. So, you know, I think that there's a nuanced conversation that I'm not trying to have about the use of AI in general. So I don't want to just write it off purely because it's AI that equals bad. We'll talk about some of the ways I do think AI is bad, but I'm not going to get into a full thing about that. One of the main ways that I do think that AI is bad is its impact on jobs. And in the vignette, apparently more than 100 real human people worked on this. They do give the actress who helped portray Christie a moment to give her own attribution with her own face. So I appreciate that. It does seem like that this is a high effort and high quality product. So I don't think that this is an example of just like shilling or cutting corners. It seems like they engaged some like legit scholars. They had Mark Aldridge in there, who's like a well-known and well-respected Agatha Christie scholar. It sounds like the project was approached from a place of love and respect. So I'm not trying to criticize that. And what they said they were going for was not an impersonation, but an interpretation of her. And her great-grandson seems to be the representative from the estate who authorized this, and what he said was he wanted to make sure that it was actually a useful course for writers, that it was based on her actual words and writing, and that if they were gonna do AI, that it actually did look and sound like her. Okay, so I want to say that all of that is the like, to be fair part of this. Okay. But I think that this is wrong for many reasons. So first of all, I will just say aesthetically, I find this to be creepy as hell. These AI things where it's the person's face and voice moving, I just find it to be weird, uncanny valley-ness, and for that reason, I'm out. But that's just a me thing. Aesthetically, I find these things to be kind of repellent. So there you go. But one question I asked myself is, do I think that this is different than an adaptation of her work? Or, for example, in recent years, they've done a lot of other writers using her characters to create new short stories or novels based on her existing IP. And to me, the answer to that is yes, this is different. They are using her likeness and her voice, not her creative output, to extrapolate onto other creative outlets. So the same way that like fan fiction to me is not intrinsically intruding on the personhood or the original creativity of the author. It's creating your own output based on existing IP. So to me, that is different. There's usually not confusion between, is this a work from the original author versus the new author? I will say I do find some of the branding on these to be a little not to my taste, because I do think that it's portraying it as by Agatha Christie, and then you can see in the leaves the actual authors. Like, I do think they tread that line sometimes, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that it's not creating confusion that she's making new work, which would be impressive considering she's been dead for half a century. And actually, I think it's probably, like, the analogy that I thought of was sort of like when deceased artists or deceased musicians have things come out from the vault. It's a little cash grabby, but it's, in those cases, it's actual new work from those from those musicians or artists. So maybe it would be closer to like if you license a song from a musician who's passed away and their estate is benefiting from that. I feel like that's closer to what these adaptations and using the character new works are like. And then I also thought about, is this different than a biopic? So like the Ray Charles one that Jamie Foxx won an Oscar for, or the Johnny Cash one that Joaquin Phoenix, I think, won an Oscar for, and Reese Witherspoon, or, insert your biopic here. I do think that is different because there's a level of immersion breaking. You're not, even if somebody is directly quoting the person, they look a lot like the person, but there is a difference. And I feel like there's a level of immersion breaking in that to me feels different than the person's actual face and voice. There's a level of kind of implicit acknowledgement that this is not actually that person that I think is important to being respectful in the portrayal, if that makes sense. Okay, so now that we've established that, for me at least, there is a difference between an adaptation, a creative work, or something like a biopic and what this is, I want to talk about what the ethical issues are. So in AI in general, to me, there's kind of like three main buckets of ethical issues. There is the environmental impact. If you are not aware of that, I recommend you go look it up. AI is tremendously energy expensive and bad for our already hurting planet. AI is not good for the environment. So just any kind of extensive use of it in this way, I think, has to raise an ethical question. And then also, it does take jobs away. Like, there's been some interesting discourse about how college students using AI to complete their college courses right now are not only robbing themselves of the education they're paying for, they are training the robots that are taking away entry-level jobs. They are training the thing that is going to keep them from being able to get an entry-level job. So there's those issues. And in this case, it does sound like a lot of people did have work from this, which is great. But in terms of like the creative element of it, it seems like the actress that they hired to essentially like AI her face to look like Agatha Christie, and then like it's her body. She seems like she was a very talented actress from what we saw in the vignette. So we're taking away the opportunity for her to get credit for a good performance. So even if I appreciate that they acknowledged her at the end and let us see her real face, but like, why couldn't this have just been her? So to me, there is an issue there about like, that should have just been an actress doing a normal acting job and having her face more recognizable with that portrayal. I will say the other thing I'll put in here before we get to the biggest bucket I want to dwell on is I do think, Celine brought this up in her TikTok, but I also do think this contributes to the overall issues we're seeing right now of AI intruding into bookish spaces in a way that is not creative. It is not value add. It is not replacing what humans can do. In fact, it is like negative. We have books getting published with AI prompts in them. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is, I think there is a place AI could play in the creative process, like I said up top. But right now, what we're seeing is negative ways it is contributing to the overall creative environment of book publishing. So I think that this contributes to that. But the main thing, and it's taken us this long, but here is my problem with this. She cannot consent to her likeness and voice being used in this way. And it's her estate who's consenting on her behalf, and their motives are intrinsically conflicted with her wishes. So I want to tread lightly here because I don't know these people, and I understand that there probably is a lot of complexity to being the person or people in charge of tending to a family member's legacy and memory where they are both your family member and have some kind of public persona. Like, I'm sure that that is probably a really difficult thing to navigate, but it's not lost on me that they're giving consent to do this and other projects like this a lot more now that some of her works are coming into the public domain and they're not going to be able to make, royalty money in the same way that they used to on her actual works and her actual creative product. It's not lost on me that this is coming kind of at that time. And I don't know that this was their actual first response, but what they chose to portray as their first response when the BBC came to them about this project was not, should we do this? Like, what would her thoughts about this be? That's not what they said their first question was. They said their first question was, how do we make this first class? And while I appreciate that there is a sensitivity to preserving her legacy and frankly not tarnishing the brand, it's telling to me that that's what is being portrayed as the first response. And it's telling to me that nowhere in that little vignette did anybody even attempt to say, we think she would like this. Because I think if you're aware of her history of interacting with new technologies vis-a-vis her work product, there's a strong indication she would not like this. She was very persnickety about even letting her books be adapted into movies. So then what happens? She's that protective over her characters, and she's not going to be that protective over her voice and likeness being used in this kind of commercial filmic way. Like, there is a strong indication she would not like this. Now, I don't know for sure, obviously, and I'm not her family, so I wouldn't be able to like speak to her personally, but I do think that there's a reason why they didn't even try to say like, oh, she would like this. I think that they probably have had to do some mental gymnastics to get to a place where they could even pretend that this is something that she would have been jazzed about. Like, I'm not gonna say she was a Luddite, but I think she was known to be really hesitant about new technologies. In contrast, for example, to someone like Walt Disney. I believe that they're adding him to the like Great Talks with Mr. Lincoln exhibit, and they're gonna have like a really creepy Uncanny Valley animatronic of him speaking. I think that that's a good contrast example, because Walt Disney was someone who was known to be embracing of new technologies and creating new technologies. In fact, what the technology they're going to use on him and his likeness in his theme park, where his estate is directly making the money, is a technology, it's a continuation of a technology he created to do that to Abe Lincoln. So I think that that's a good contrast of like, there's possibly a world where you have people who are known to be like really technology forward, who you can easily imagine being cool with this. I just don't think Agatha Christie is one of those people. And like, it seems to, I think this particular application is probably a more innocuous one of what they could do, but it does open the door. Like, the fact that they started doing those weird I mean, I don't want to be too I feel like I'm being judgmental in this, but this is my opinion, so I guess it's intrinsically judgmental. Take that with a grain of salt. They started doing those weird hologram concerts with Tupac, and the next thing you know, you have frickin' Drake using him in a rap battle against a California rapper. I mean, like, is there any world where Tupac would be cool with that? No. And how did we get to that point? It's because they started letting his image and likeness be used in certain ways that led to this AI nightmare that we're now living in with him and having frickin' Drake use his... Anyway, I just think that this is a pretty innocuous version, but like, what happens when we're a couple generations away and now we have Agatha Christie's AI likeness and image being used in ways that she couldn't have even possibly have contemplated, and potentially her current estate cannot contemplate. And I mean, it's a unique issue that exists when the source material is present. It creates this opportunity to use what exists from older technologies into newer technologies. Like, do you think if they could do this with Shakespeare, they wouldn't? They would, but it doesn't exist because he lived in a time before we could capture him in that way. I mean, we're freaking still having debates about if he even was who he said he was. So like, it's this unique dynamic that estates of people who were alive within living memory. I don't know. It's a temptation that I think should be resisted because it is just intrinsically to me a consent violation. That feels gross to me. Like, I don't care who they are. I just feel like that it's a weird consent boundary that's being violated. I don't know. And then I guess the last question, sorry, I made notes. I want to make sure I cover all of my ranting thoughts here. So to me, that the consent is like the number one reason why this is like creepy and wrong. But then the last question I asked myself were, are the ethical issues outweighed by the benefit to the world? An example of where I believe they're using some version of AI that I do think any ethical issues are outweighed is they have, like Peter Jackson did this for a bunch of World War I footage in a documentary, but I've seen it happening a lot more, where people are using a version of AI to retime, colorize, and animate either still photographs or like, you know, early film that kind of has a weird pace, like a weird timing to it, to what our modern sensibilities are, and it's in black and white, like to make that come to life in a way. To me, the ethical issues that might be intrinsic with that are outweighed because I think it has a historical value to making people from the distant past feel more like humans to us. Like, I think that World War I documentary was really powerful in humanizing the loss of that war and seeing soldiers in more of a way that we can connect with, I think had an intrinsic value that would outweigh whatever ethical concerns there are. But in this case, I just don't think that that's true, because this all could have been done without AI and it would be fine. Like, absolutely fine. Nay, better, because what you could do is you could have the actress portraying Agatha Christie when they have her actual words to act those out, and then you could have a scholar like Mark Aldridge or whoever come in and talk about some of the things that were not great about her approach to writing. In particular, some of her character stuff that now gets edited out of the published versions for good reason. You know, and maybe talking about her choice to use certain racial caricatures or slurs that were intrinsic to the time period, but I think could be a lesson for a potential writer of like, hey, think through how you portray certain things, because I mean, not that anybody's going to be the next Agatha Christie who's watching this, but if you could be, or if this is going to be, you know, live past just the next few years, something to think about of like how you're, how well will your portrayals age. Yeah. So I think that it actually would be better if it wasn't AI and only using her words. And actually, the whole thing is maddening because it is pitched towards people who are trying to be writers. So why does a video of this have to exist at all? You're trying to be a writer and you can't read? Now I get that, I think that this is their whole thing and so they approach the estate with it, but this would be so much better as a book. In fact, I should look and see if there is a book with all of like compiled everything she has to say about writing, because I think that would be great. I would enjoy reading that. And if you're trying to frickin' write, can we not expect people to read? So like this as a video does not have to exist, and in fact, maybe undermines the very thing the person that you're making the video for is trying to do. So it does not have to exist. And also, I think that it perpetuates this entitlement we have of like, oh, I never got to meet Agatha Christie, so this is a way that I can experience her presence. We're not entitled to that. You can't, like, some things we just don't get to experience. As a human being, you're never going to have every experience possible, even within your own time, much less others. And I think we just need to let the dead rest. That's what I said in like all caps suggest of like, let the dead rest. Like, don't, letting someone's estate do this to them. I feel, to me, this feels similarly to people going to like a graveyard and not being respectful in it. Like, this feels really violating of somebody's memory, and I don't know. I feel like we should just, there's a lot of, I guess, I'm just inarticulate with rage now. But anyway, I'll just wrap it up here. I find this to be extremely distasteful and disappointing. I would love for them to do a book version of this at some point, and at that point, I'd be happy to support it. But this version of this project, I think, is just wrong. I think it should not exist, and I respect and appreciate the craft and love that went into it, but I think it was problematic on first principles. So that is my rant. I probably should go back to work now because I have a meeting coming up, but let me know what you think. Yeah, let me know what you think. Hit the bell if you want to know when I'm going to post next, because I don't know. And yeah, take care of each other, take care of yourself, and I'll catch you later.